It's a contemporary film about the life of Jesus, but it's not really about the life of Jesus. It's by Angel Studios, told from the standpoint of people who encounter Jesus. It's called The Chosen. And it's been going for several years, and I've been hearing people say, well, you need to watch it, and I finally did, and in many ways it's what inspired this talk. I want to just sort of say I am not a film theorist, nor am I a film critic, nor am I a film specialist, nor am I a theologian. Sometimes I've called that. My title is Professor of Philosophy of Religion, and I've spent my whole career, all 50 years of it, wallowing in French post-structuralism, continental philosophy, various variations and extensions into the realm of popular culture and popular problems, even popular religion, the New Age movement, contemporary Satanism, and so forth. So I'm not going to talk about film or even this particular film per se. What I want to talk about is something that probably doesn't come up in a lot of conversations about film, and what I want to discuss is the Messianic, not the Messianic in film, not as a subject area of film, because The Chosen is not about the Messianic. I would argue The Chosen really isn't about Jesus at all. It's not a Jesus flick. There's something else going on here. Even though it's done by Christian directors, the effect and the inputs are quite different than what we've seen. I'm also going to bring in, if I have time, and I know everybody wants to go to dinner, you had a long day with few breaks, so I had a longer presentation. I'm going to try to kind of sum it up very quickly and get to it. I want to bring in Deleuze, Gilles Deleuze, in his Cinema 1, Cinema 2, which are very dense books, but they help us to understand from a philosophical standpoint, and we might say from a epistemological standpoint. Deleuze uses a strange term that nobody's quite ever understood. He calls it transcendental empiricism. And that's, in ways, film is a manifestation of what Deleuze understands as to be the expression of signs in contemporary images and contemporary culture. So what I want to touch on here in this presentation is how our contemporary experiences of temporality, of time, align with those of first century Judea and Samaria, and how innumerable what Deleuze calls perception images concerning Jesus become part of the furniture of our contemporary thought and imagination. Okay, so what I want to talk about is the contemporary, and this is my word here, I'm using it in a unique sense, sensorium. When I invoke the word sensorium, I mean something quite different from what Western philosophy has as a matter of convention called sense perception. The sensorium includes affects, anticipations, recollections, inklings, and what the late social theorist Peter Berger labels signals of transcendence. New as well as legacy media can give both texture and contour to the sensorium. But if we take Deleuze seriously, it is cinema, whether digital or analog, that provides the most complete, or we should say high-resolution expression for our age. I'm going to quote from Deleuze. The image itself is a system of relationships between its elements, that is, a set of relationships of time from which the variable present only flows. Deleuze calls these temporalized modes of expression cinematographic concepts, which take us well beyond the investigation of techniques of cinematic production and the various historically contingent modes of audience reception. I'll quote one more time from Deleuze just so you get a feeling of what's going on here. He says, these concepts are not technical, such as camera shots, etc., nor are they linguistic in the sense in which it has been said that the cinema was the universal language, or in the sense in which it has been said that cinema is even a language at all. The cinema seems to us to be a composition of images and signs. That is a pre-verbal intelligible concept, a pure semiotics, of linguistic inspiration which abolishes the image and tends to dispense with the sign. That's a quote from his book, Cinema One. All right, so skip some prepared remarks here. So the question we must ask, therefore, is how does this idea of cinema as the kind of conveyance and expression, let us say, the manifestation of the semiotic complex, which is coextensive with the contemporary sensorium, what Deleuze again calls the general perception image. We must ask, how does the Messianic manifest in film in this matter? Or for that matter, what is the Messianic? What do we even mean by the Messianic? And why would this have anything to do with film? We're not talking about films about the Messiah, and I want to be very clear about this. Or even in a sense trying to communicate that Jesus is the Messiah. In the particular clip I showed you very quickly, which we didn't get to right away, this is in the first of the series, and where you have all these, Jesus is only here and there, he's barely there. You get the life of Simon the fisherman and Andrew, and they're involved in debt, and it's all kind of a complex family drama. And then you get Mary Magdalene, who's called Lilith, who's in the Red Quarter, which is like the red light district, but she's possessed by demons, and even one of the most prestigious Pharisees can't exorcise her demons, and so she goes out into the night. Finally, the demons left for a time, and she's walking out of a pub, literally, and she looks behind them, and of course, the first impression you get is somebody stalking her. And you don't really realize who it is. It's Jesus. So we have Jesus, the stalker, who in a sense calls her by name, which manifests the first of the signs, the book of signs in John about the Messianic. But he never calls himself the Messiah right away. People call him that. I'll get into that in a minute. So I would argue there's an ongoing effort to bring the Messianic in a Jewish more than a Christian sense in the movie making today. And I'm not myself really somebody who goes to Jesus films, but Angel Studios' Chosen has really drawn me in, and not just because it's designed like most current streaming media for binge watching. It's series after series. My wife will watch, and I will watch 2 episodes of The Chosen, and then we'll go back to Dynasty or something like that. My interest has far less to do with subject matter, the life of Jesus and the disciples, than anybody might gauge. It has to do instead with, and again, this is going to throw another loop in you, with the undeconstructible justice of the Messianic rupture into time. Say what? Words might sound familiar if you read Derrida, Spectres of Marx. But what I want you to think in these terms, what we're dealing with in film here, because we have a thought picture that probably confounds and leave your head spinning. Now, as a kid in the heyday of Jesus spectacles in the 50s and 60s, I watched them all. King of Kings, The Greatest Story Ever Told, Ben-Hur, The Robe. They were a cinematic buffet to augment the garden variety of biblical tales and memes I'd absorbed in Presbyterian Sunday school. And they also fitted well with the public mythos of the Cold War time period that cast, the world as its own Manichaean struggle between the forces of light and darkness. Whenever the Romans appear on the screen, the moralistic mental micro-machinery of a child automatically prompted me to picture them as the Soviets. And Jesus came to function invariably as a larger-than-life superhero who made his appearance just in the nick of time to turn history around, even if he first had to step into his own kind of phone booth, which was, the Golgotha, the cross. When I came of age, about the same time as the Vietnam War, urban riots, the New Left, the rise of black militancy, the sexual revolution, and the hippie tune-out or chill-out, or whatever you want to call it, an entirely new genre within the Jesus cultural imaginary suddenly flourished. This was Jesus, the angry social revolutionary of Pasolini's The Gospel According to Matthew. But on the main, the late Vietnam and post-Vietnam era featured a variety of popular movies that cast Jesus as an anti-hero or suddenly portrayed him as a countercultural nobody. I would say in the Chosen, Jesus is some of that, but he's some of that's something that gives hint of something much more. All right, so since the turn of the millennium, Jesus films have overall attempted to be less agenda-driven as well as theologically in your face, focusing more on accuracy of historical detail, the nuances of Bible storytelling, and more down-to-earth in the framing of the subject matter. Of course, you can think of The Passion of the Christ, 2004, The Nativity Story, 2006, and Mary Magdalene, who's the subject of this clip, 2018, and these are films that come to mind. Portrayals of Jesus in the movie theaters have fluctuated for over a century with changes in religious sensibilities, and with advances in cinematography, and of course historical scholarships that gives us a better, if not clearer, insight into who Jesus actually was and how he was viewed by his contemporaries. But I'm not here to rehash the massive amount of academic literature on the way Jesus appeared on the silver screen. It may come as a shock, but my fascination with The Chosen has very little to do with Christian or even Jesus filmmaking. It has everything to do with the intrusion of what the German Jewish cultural critic and philosopher Walter Benjamin dubbed the Messianic. The Messianic is a motif that haunts Benjamin's thought. As a scholar who came of age right after World War I in a civilization riven by apocalyptic violence and social chaos, Benjamin angled for intellectual rapprochement between Jewish mysticism and the spirit of revolutionary Marxism that was in the air across Europe. Benjamin never pulled it off, but he gave inspiration to a later generation of critical theorists who had a tremendous influence on the generation after World War II, who largely reshaped American intellectual life between 1985 and 2005. These were known as postmodernists or post-structuralists, which include, the most famous of this generation was the French thinker Jacques Derrida, who was highly indebted to the work of Benjamin. In his book, Spectres of Marx, published right after the collapse of communism, Derrida proudly announced that justice is deconstruction, deconstruction is justice, which he identified with Benjamin's Messianic. Which brings me back to The Chosen. The Chosen is not like any Jesus film you've ever seen because it's not really about Jesus at all. As I said, it's about the Messianic. In the 1920s, Benjamin made a number of cryptic statements, which are often notes and literary fragments, about messianism without a Messiah. The Messianic is not contained in any kind of human personality or historical player. It is that which intrudes unexpectedly into history in a manner that is equally incalculable. It is hardly recognizable at the time it appears, even though it radically reconfigures the meaning of past, present, and future. Now, contrast the Messianic with what the Christian tradition routinely refers to as eschatology or apocalypticism. It's not about some grand and glorious finale. You take the popular Christian books, evangelical books, Left Behind, all the rage during the George Bush era, with a kind of kitsch version of classical eschatology. It was the Marvel Comics version of Christianity. The book of Revelation may be the closest thing we find in the Bible to a CGI-driven Hollywood action thriller. The Chosen, however, deliberately abstains from any kind of hint of melodrama or spectacle. The Egyptian actor Jonathan Rumi, who plays Jesus, who artfully distracts us from making him the center of attention in the movie. That Jesus also dodges just about every familiar Christian or Christ cliche. You know Jesus is the Messiah, and Jesus himself acknowledges just matter-of-factly, in an almost matter-of-fact way. But, of course, as we know from the Gospel of Mark, it spends all the Gospels here. He says, shh, don't tell anybody about any of this. His messiahship routinely deconstructs throughout the film, whenever it makes an appearance before our very eyes. The messianic, like justice for Benjamin, turns out to be utterly elusive. It is, as Derrida says, impossible to capture in the thought of the moment. For Derrida, both justice and the messianic are undeconstructible, which is to say they cannot easily be explained or explained away. It's the same with the miracles that Jesus performs. They just sort of happen in media res, and then they go away, and there seems to be amazement. It's like, did I really see what I saw, that kind of thing? Not like, oh my God, here's the Messiah. It's like, well, yeah, there's something going on here. It's like the old Bob Dylan song in the 60s, something is happening here, but you don't know what it is, do you, Mr. Jones? And that's exactly how the disciples and many of the other encounters in the film portray Jesus. The Messianic is what offers powerful hope, not because it foretells the future, but as it is secret of a future that takes on a dimension we can barely comprehend. Like a tiny mustard seed sown in the soil on which we mindlessly tread, it grows slowly and inconspicuously out of sight until it no longer can be ignored. Now, as is the case in Jesus' day, our world is awash with ideological fantasies and fanaticisms about how we're supposed to go about making the world more just, whether we're supposed to save it or simply be saved. In America, much of Christianity is split into warring camps that favor incompatible political struggles. The religious right and the religious left are hardly different from the Sanhedrin and the Zealots, both of whom had a hard time making sense of this rabbi who preached a president-coming messianic kingdom that not at any time fit within anyone's pre-wired cognitive or theological frames, whether it be those of the Roman praetor, who is portrayed in the film, or the official Pharisees, or even the revolutionary zealot Sicarii. In the present age of secular disillusion and spiritual cognitive dissonance, the messianic still stalks us. It is what Derrida calls a specter, something that is unmistakably present, yet whose shape or substance is not really readily discernible. Jesus himself describes the messianic as a thief in the night, for which we must be ever vigilant and watchful. The Messiah brings justice, but as another celebrated 20th century Jewish philosopher, Emanuel Levinas, put it, it is always like an in-breaking lightning flash that reveals the face of the other. And that's kind of the way Jesus comes across in the film. Since its initial episode, the producers of The Chosen have stressed that they did not want to make a movie about Jesus per se, but about how those who lived with him, came across him, or just haphazardly encountered him, might have perceived him, and all the kind of crosstalk and backtalk that ensued. We're still struggling today with the possibility of that kind of encounter, not with Jesus per se, but with Messianic. And the moment when it happens may be like no other time or situation we've ever experienced. What might Deleuze, who I talk about with his notion of the time image in cinematic movement, say about The Chosen? Deleuze is not interested in religious cinema at all, but his distinctions between movement image or action image and the time image is quite relevant here. The movement image is that of an unfolding spectacle, of a situation that is disrupted by action, that returns to a modified situation. The situation belongs somehow to what Deleuze terms universal history. The time of the spectacle is the time of universal history, Lyotard's Grand Récit. Both are drawn from Hegelianism. The Jesus movie, originally devised by Hollywood, belongs to the Grand Récit, or the grand narrative. They can be traced through Hegel all the way back to Augustine's City of God. The Jesus who appears in the spectacle is the God-man who breaks into time and then turns it around to create a new situation. The Jesus spectacle ends with glory, however it's conveyed cinematically. But the spectacle also follows a kind of archetypal script Deleuze writes in Cinema 1, the laws of the action image across all the genres. The first concepts, the action image is organic representation in its entire ensemble. It is structural because the places and moments are well defined in their oppositions. In short, it is the purpose of the movement image to unify time and temporality of our experience to a timeless narrative form. Well, the Messianic is in what Deleuze calls the time image, which breaks up time, which makes it no longer coherent, which makes it in some ways disconnected and disjointed. Derrida constantly in Spectres of Marx discusses the time being out of joint, taking the quote as Tarkovsky did from Shakespeare. It is the time that out of joint is the time of the Messianic, when we don't know what's coming, we don't really have a sense of connection to the past, but we're always at the particular moment in hope. But suddenly something happens, and it doesn't give us hope per se, but it realizes this disjointedness of time is kind of slowly coming together. It is being sewn together in ways that we don't understand, even if not in a seamless way. And of course, we still belong to everyday life, to the world as it goes on. In The Chosen, you have this long kind of almost soap opera-like portrayal of Simon Peter's struggle with his wife, just to be understood. Almost like he almost needs marriage counseling. You say, well, why is this here? This is not really found in the Gospels. But yet it is real. It is, as we say in German, alltäglich. It is every day. And it is that where the Messianic happens. And it is in that moment of that break, of that rupture of the intersection, that the Messianic reveals itself.